The surgeon ridiculed the overweight nurse and transferred her to janitorial duties. But when homeless people brought in a strange patient, Shirley Porter sat in the HR office of a private clinic, looking with undisguised pleading at the groomed, blonde HR woman. The latter, with a somewhat predatory gleam in her eyes, carefully studied Shirley's educational documents and records of her internship at a public clinic. The HR woman's red lips twisted into a contemptuous grimace, and her pink fingernail impatiently tapped the surface of her desk. Finally, she looked away from the papers and gave the girl sitting in front of her an openly appraising glance. At that moment, Shirley realized that she was facing yet another failure. "I still can't offer you a position as a nurse in our clinic," the HR woman cooed in an exaggeratedly polite tone. "You see, you still don't have enough experience to work in an institution of our level. Try starting at your local hospital, for example, and gain some experience. You'll also understand that being a nurse is not as easy as it might seem at first glance." "But it's all written there," Shirley protested in a trembling voice. "Look, there's a certificate for excellent studies and a recommendation from my internship. Marie, I know that this position is still open. I saw it on the clinic's website. You've been looking for a suitable candidate for a month now. What's wrong with me?" Marie's secretary, a fragile, mousy woman in glasses, looked sympathetically at the overweight girl sitting across from her boss. It was evident on the unfortunate girl's face that she understood the true reason for the rejection. "I understand. You think that because I am overweight, I won't look as brilliant among the other clinic staff. But I will work well, I promise. You have no idea how hard I'm willing to work to justify your trust." Hearing how openly Shirley spoke about her appearance, Marie lowered her eyes and pursed her lips. She couldn't imagine how an employee with such a large figure could serve the demanding patients at the clinic, who were accustomed to seeing beauty in everything around them, especially when they were paying for it. "Shirley, I'm glad you're objective about your figure, but that's not the issue. Many of the patients who come to us have, let's say, very high standards for the staff, especially concerning service. As a nurse, it would be very challenging for you to keep up with their, how should I put it, fast-paced lifestyle. Often, we receive businessmen or people from very high social classes, and they, as you know, always and everywhere think about work, even on a hospital bed, God forbid. You need to be quick and resilient. You understand? Honestly, I'm not sure you can handle it." The woman put Shirley's documents back into the folder and handed them to her. She hoped she had behaved as correctly as possible. "Thank you for your time." "I understand," Shirley said, barely holding back tears of hurt and disappointment as she rose from her chair. "You'll succeed, don't despair," Marie called after her. "It just might be somewhere else, more suitable for you." Shirley didn't reply, only nodded. She headed for the exit, intending to leave the clinic, when suddenly a tall young man in a pristine white coat nearly collided with her at the door. The young man instinctively put an arm around Shirley's shoulders to steady her and keep her from falling. In that brief moment, the young chief physician noticed the tears in her eyes. "So, what's going on here?" he asked, frowning at the HR manager. "Why are people always crying in your office, Marie? Can you explain that to me?" The blonde with bright pink nails instantly blushed, like a lobster thrown into boiling water. Though the new chief physician was relatively young, he had already gained a reputation for his stern disposition. Marie knew it was unwise to anger him, so she just stretched her full red lips into a flattering smile. "Everything's fine, Patrick," she said in a honeyed voice. "We just finished another interview for the nurse position." "And," the chief physician demanded, "did you turn her down again?" He looked at Shirley with sympathy and understanding, who was standing frozen before him. "Let me see your documents," he said, extending his hand toward the folder Shirley held under her arm. The girl was surprised by his directness, but handed him the papers. After skimming through them, Patrick first grunted, then looked at the HR manager from under his brows. "Marie, what's this about? Why did you reject such a valuable specialist? We've been unable to fill this position for a month. First, it's the candidate's age you don't like, then some other made-up criteria. We need professionalism and the ability to respond quickly in tough situations, not a pretty face and long legs. I heard this girl begging you to hire her. So give her a chance. Let her prove herself, for goodness sake. Don't be so quick to dismiss good candidates, Marie. Especially since all her documents are in order. I understand, Patrick. Forgive me. I just thought that Shirley might struggle with our work schedule, Marie replied. Let her decide that for herself, the chief physician interrupted. We urgently need a nurse in the surgical department. We're short on staff. I'm sure this young woman can handle the responsibilities. Shirley hadn't expected such kind words directed at her. A sweet, childlike innocent smile spread across her lips, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. After the chief physician left, Marie silently took the documents from Shirley and told her to come in on Monday when everything would be ready. Come to work at 8:30 a.m. Under no circumstances should you be late. We have ironclad discipline here, she warned the girl. We'll take you on a 3-month probationary period. If there are no complaints about you during this time and you perform your duties well, we'll hire you permanently. Not believing her luck, Shirley promised that if needed, she could come at 8 a.m. After thanking the woman, she hurried down the clinic steps and walked home with a spring in her step, delighted by her long-awaited good fortune. On the way, she stopped at a bakery and bought herself 3 cabbage pies and a cake. After all, it was her first job. Such an occasion deserved a celebration. As Shirley walked, she reflected on her past. She had grown up in an ordinary family. Her father, Chris Porter, worked as a forklift driver, while her mother, Doris Porter, was an accountant at a small company specializing in repairing and selling ready-made windows. The family lived modestly, always within their means. They weren't poor, but they also didn't reach for the stars. Both parents were content with their jobs and had worked in their positions for many years. Initially, when Shirley was still very young, she was just like her peers, an ordinary, healthy girl with beautiful dark blonde hair, laughing blue eyes, and a kind, always slightly shy smile. Her parents loved her very much and tried to provide her with everything she needed to feel comfortable in the challenging environment of her classmates. Shirley always excelled in her studies, consistently earning top grades and receiving several certificates for her academic achievements. She was kind-hearted, with a big, pure heart, and always had plenty of friends. She often helped her classmates with their essays and solved equations for them during difficult tests. Shirley enjoyed being able to help her friends, and they, of course, were thrilled to have such a wonderful, kind, and intelligent friend. The first troubling signs regarding Shirley's health appeared when she was 12 years old. Due to hormonal changes, she gained several extra kilograms in a very short period. Over one summer, Shirley rapidly went from being a normally proportioned girl to a cute but slightly chubby young lady. Her parents were surprised by how much their daughter had changed after spending 3 months at her grandmother's, especially considering she had spent her time outdoors and mostly eaten vegetables and berries. Shirley herself hardly noticed the changes at first. The doctor who examined her upon her return home found nothing unusual in the process. That sometimes happens in the early stages of puberty, the doctor said, shrugging. Try not to focus your daughter's attention on her changing body. All her vital parameters are within the normal range. She'll grow out of it in a couple of months and become a slim beauty, she reassured Shirley's parents. So, for the first time, Shirley had to go to school in clothes that were a size and a half larger than what she usually wore. The kids in her class noticed her weight gain, but they didn't say anything aloud. After all, she had helped them out of tough situations during quizzes and tests many times. They felt it was awkward to make fun of her, especially since her weight wasn't that significant yet. But as the months passed, her condition only worsened. It seemed that Shirley grew bigger each day just by breathing. Very soon, she had to replace her wardrobe again, as her weight approached a solid 70 kilograms, despite being only 163 centimeters tall. Shirley began to worry seriously. With each kilogram gained, another friend distanced themselves from her, claiming they were embarrassed to hang out with such a cow. The boys also started giving her hurtful nicknames, the mildest of which was Shirley the Elephant. At night, the unhappy girl often cried bitterly into her soft pillow, and during the day, she secretly refused to eat. Over time, Shirley nearly stopped eating altogether, drinking only water and a little unsweetened tea. Doris, noticing the alarming signs in her daughter's behavior, tried to have a serious talk with her. "Shirley, honey, why aren't you eating at all? I worked so hard to make your favorite cutlets for you and your father." "I'm full, Mom," the girl stubbornly replied. "I ate well at school. I just don't want any." Her mother placed a hand on her back. "Sweetheart, if something's bothering you, you know you can always talk to me about it. Of all people, I will always understand you. You are my dear and beloved daughter." Shirley sniffled, and unbidden tears of hurt glistened in her eyes. "Mom, how can I live like this? I'm so fat and heavy. No one in class wants to be friends with me anymore. They all just call me names. They're ashamed to sit next to me in class. Can you imagine?" Tears streamed down the girl's face. Doris hugged her warmly and held her close. "Oh, sweetheart, what nonsense. You're not fat at all. Yes, you've put on a little weight, but the doctor said it's normal. This happens to many people at your age." No, Mom, that's just it, it's not many. Just look at me. I'm the only one in our grade who looks like I weigh as much as a tractor." Shirley pulled away from her mother, wiping away the betraying tears. "Look at Karen Carr, Lisa Lindsay, they're like goddesses. So thin and slender. They can wear any clothes they want." "And so what?" her mother exclaimed, throwing up her hands. "But you, Shirley, are the smartest girl in the class, if not the whole school. That's far more valuable, believe me." "There's nothing valuable about that," her daughter shook her head. "They only use me to copy my work. That's all they need me for." "Then don't let them. Show some pride, for heaven's sake," Doris stubbornly insisted. "It's easy for them to be nice when they need something from you. But what if you deprive them of that? Then things will only get worse," Shirley disagreed. "I don't know what to do, Mom. Deep down, I know what I'm doing isn't right, but what if I really am like this because of food? What if I never lose weight?" Her mother gently stroked her arm. "Shirley, don't listen to anyone. You're beautiful as you are. And this will pass, it definitely will. Right now, you need to focus on finishing school, deciding where to go next, and figuring out your future. Do you understand? If you start refusing food regularly, you'll definitely ruin your health. And then no one, not me, not the doctor, can guarantee you'll change. Is being thin worth your happy future? What do you think? You don't need to answer me, decide that for yourself first and foremost." Shirley pondered. Of course, her mother's words made sense. However, Doris had never struggled with excess weight, nor had her husband. Both of Shirley's parents had always been of normal human constitution, if not perfect. They certainly hadn't expected that their daughter would ever face such issues. Shirley understood that they meant well, but she still worried about her appearance. Nonetheless, she agreed to eat that evening, not wanting to upset her mother. However, the feelings of anxiety and guilt over eating remained, and she knew she would have to live with this for many years to come. Shirley graduated from school with a gold medal, a certificate for outstanding academic achievements, and a body weight of 90 kilograms. Despite her efforts to earn the respect and friendship of her peers, she remained an outcast to them, smart but very overweight, sitting in the third row. After graduating from school, Shirley enrolled in a nursing college, which required her to move from her small hometown to a regional metropolis. Here, she faced real bullying from her classmates, turning the long-awaited education in her beloved profession, Shirley very much wanted to become a nurse, into a nightmare. She was placed in a local dormitory with other students from out of town. However, the reception there was far from warm. Her roommates refused to communicate with the poor girl out of principle, ignoring all her attempts to be friendly. Every evening, when Shirley returned from her studies, there was some terrible offensive inscription on her dorm room door: "Fatty, lose weight, a mammoth lives here," and other similar remarks. Naturally, her roommates were unhappy with these antics, but blamed Shirley for everything. The unfortunate girl, instead of preparing for the next school day, had to spend late nights scrubbing off the disgusting insults from her door, only for them to reappear the next evening. Things were no better during the day when Shirley had to spend time with her group. Her classmates acted as if they had never seen an overweight person before, mocking her by jumping around like gorillas, hooting, and whistling behind her back. Every morning, a new message describing Shirley's weight in the most derogatory terms would appear on the board in the classroom where they had their first class. Her classmates competed to come up with the most creative nickname for Shirley each week, with the winner receiving a crate of beer. The most memorable nickname recently was Godzilla, which they teased her with for 2 weeks. At one point, Shirley wanted to leave everything behind and never look back. She couldn't even confide in her mother about the relentless bullying; she was too ashamed. However, she remembered her mother's words about pursuing what you really want, ignoring the difficulties and obstacles along the way. Only then could you achieve your goals. Academically, Shirley excelled, which was the only reason she endured everything happening to her. However, she occasionally couldn't hold back her emotions and would hide in the farthest women's restroom at the college, where she could cry without fear of encountering her dorm mates. Compared to all this harassment, her life at school seemed relatively peaceful. Shirley knew her appearance was far from modern beauty standards, but she still hoped to find true and good friends at college. She dreamed of meeting people who, due to their intellectual maturity and emotional depth, wouldn't care about her physical appearance. Unfortunately, that miracle didn't happen. Shirley, who remained a kind and compassionate person at heart, found it incredibly difficult to endure all of this daily. With the onset of her weight gain, Shirley's constant companions became bitterness, tears, and disappointment. Thus, at just over 20 years old, she found herself an unwilling outcast among harsh students, tormented by her imperfections and the lack of prospects in a world where a beautiful appearance and slender legs were valued more than a brilliant mind and a good education. Shirley shuddered at the thought that this was just the beginning of her future problems. The real challenges began when Shirley graduated from nursing school. She was one of the top 2 graduates in her class. She planned to start her career as a nurse in a private clinic, but her job search quickly turned into a real obstacle course. She thought that with such professional qualifications, she would be welcomed at any, even the most prestigious clinic. However, the reality proved to be far more complicated. Throughout her education, Shirley believed that the adult world would be more understanding or at least more tolerant of someone like her than school and college had been. She assumed that people in leadership positions, especially in healthcare, would recognize the importance of professionalism and attentiveness in a nurse. That was the reasoning of the freshly minted graduate. However, at the very first clinic where she went for an interview, she noticed something strange. Not once did she see a woman older than 40 or even 35 among the staff. What was even more unsettling was that none of the women resembled her in the slightest. All the employees bustling around Shirley had almost model-like features, and most seemed like they started their day at a beauty salon, perfecting their makeup and hair. Shirley felt uncomfortable immediately. Would she face the same wall of incomprehension that had followed her all these years? Why? Why does this always happen to me? She kept wondering as she left her first interview. That day, they promised to call her back once they confirmed all the necessary details for her file. But days passed, then 2 weeks, and Shirley never received that call. She realized that this experience would likely repeat itself during her job search. Unfortunately, she was right. Wherever she tried to get hired, she was met with rejection. Every time she entered the modern, spacious offices of various private clinics, Shirley saw the same picture. The management team mostly consisted of middle-aged and older men, while the nurses and other specialists were all very slim and attractive young women. In the competitive struggle against them, Shirley stood no chance, simply because her weight exceeded the accepted standards of beauty or even a conventionally pleasant appearance. This was incredibly frustrating. Shirley felt her anxiety growing with each passing day, and her future seemed increasingly uncertain. Returning home to live with her parents for a while, she felt ashamed to tell them how horribly her classmates had treated her during her studies. Thus, Doris and Chris never found out the truth. Shirley lied, saying that her new friends from college were, like her, busy looking for their first job, leaving them little time to call or meet up. Strangely enough, her parents believed these lies. They couldn't understand why their daughter, now an adult, remained such a lonely person. Shirley had neither the strength nor the desire to explain everything to them. In the end, Shirley decided to seriously focus on her health. She thought that if she could lose at least some weight, her chances of landing a desirable job might increase. The girl began experimenting with a wide variety of diets, eating only vegetables and fruits, and even trying to completely abstain from food. It seemed that magazines called this intermittent fasting. However, the result was disastrous. Not only did she constantly experience painful hunger pangs, but she also began suffering from dizziness and low blood pressure. The gold standard of drinking 3 liters of water a day, which Shirley followed diligently, resulted in severe edema. She couldn't fit into even her most worn-out shoes, let alone try on new ones. The saddest part of this experience was that late at night, after her parents had gone to bed, Shirley would sneak to the refrigerator and devour everything her mother had prepared the evening before. Doris sensed that something was wrong with her daughter, but couldn't bring herself to talk to her about it. She thought Shirley was mature enough not to want advice from her parents and would likely resist discussing her weight issues with her mother again. Doris had begun to suspect that Shirley's complete abstinence from food during the day and her nocturnal raids on the fridge were somehow connected. However, being a straightforward person, she had never concerned herself with the problems of people struggling with excess weight. Doris had never heard of conditions like heightened anxiety and bulimia nervosa, so she didn't try to stop her daughter from doing what she believed was right for herself. As for her father, he always accepted his daughter as she was and didn't consider her weight to be anything unusual or repulsive. To him, Shirley's appearance and her kind-hearted nature were inseparable concepts. Chris was very proud of his daughter's academic achievements and had no doubt that she would eventually find her dream job. Meanwhile, Shirley resorted to more extreme fasting methods. She not only completely abstained from food but also added fitness to her daily routine. Strength exercises and treadmill running at the local gym initially yielded some results, and she managed to lose a few kilos. However, the improper diet and exercise regimen soon negatively impacted her health. Sometimes Shirley felt like she was about to faint, while her heart raced from the intense workouts. Soon, not even water could help her flush out the toxins accumulated during her fasting periods. Shirley's joy at her initial success quickly vanished, leaving behind damaged health and a regimen of expensive vitamins and medications she needed to take for several months. She tried to keep her poor condition a secret from her parents, but it all came to light when she fainted during another gym session. The trainer called an ambulance and immediately notified her parents, leading to a stern reprimand from both her parents and her doctor. Of course, you all get influenced by these social networks where everyone looks so slim and beautiful, taking photos in tight leggings in front of mirrors, and then you want to achieve the same bodies in 2 months, lamented the elderly gastroenterologist, checking Shirley's pulse. But you young people don't understand that it's all a deception. Do you know how many plastic surgeries are behind those images? Do you think if you stop eating and push your untrained muscles to the limit at the gym, you'll look like them? Naive. Shirley silently swallowed her tears of shame and embarrassment, wishing she could disappear under the reproachful yet loving gaze of her parents. That day, after fainting, she had to spend several hours under N4 in the emergency therapy room. It turned out that her body was utterly exhausted, despite the fact that outwardly, Shirley had hardly changed. It was hard for her to accept that such transformations in a person's body, like losing weight, don't happen as quickly as she wanted, and sometimes, it takes years for some people to reach their desired results. Nevertheless, from that moment, Shirley completely stopped torturing herself. She was seriously frightened for her own life and her parents' well-being. The thought of what might happen to them if she became disabled due to her own foolishness was terrifying. She couldn't imagine such a scenario even in her worst nightmares, so she gradually began returning to her usual routine, which was challenging in itself. The hated kilos, of course, came back. But the remaining health she had gave her hope that things could still change for the better. When she got her first job opportunity at a clinic, Shirley threw herself into her nursing duties with renewed vigor. Initially, it was tough for her among her new colleagues, the beautiful girls who strutted down the clinic corridors daily in their short lab coats. Few preferred to work in more modest uniforms with long pants and comfortable shoes. To be honest, Shirley was the only one who dressed that way. At first, the young nurses whispered behind the newcomer's back, finding it odd that such a body-positive girl had been hired in the surgery department. However, she was recommended by the chief doctor, Patrick Walker, which said a lot. Patrick Walker never vouched for anyone without good reason, not even acquaintances. So, the other staff reasoned, he must have seen something in her that prompted him to convince Marie Smith, the notoriously grumpy HR manager, to hire a recent graduate with no work experience for such a responsible nursing position. However, the gossip behind Shirley's back soon stopped. She quickly established herself as an excellent professional. All the knowledge she had acquired in medical school was put to good use, and she excelled at all her duties. Despite her size, the new nurse always responded swiftly to calls and could cross the entire facility in minutes to reach a specific patient's room. The clinic's clients were also very pleased with her work and spoke highly of her. Shirley was exceptionally skilled at administering injections and IVs, leaving no marks or bruises on patients' skin, and they felt no more pain than a mosquito bite. Shirley also excelled in dressing wounds. Injuries and sprains treated by her always healed quickly, thus reducing patients' stay in the clinic. It was no coincidence that the young nurse had a special certificate from her school for outstanding achievements in studying surgery. Nurse Shirley could suture a wound of any complexity blindfolded, set a dislocated joint if necessary, and apply a complex bandage for severe injuries. She felt a genuine thrill every time she was able to do the work she believed she was born to do. In time, Shirley's picture was proudly displayed on the clinic's honor board in the lobby. The smiling nurse was named Employee of the Month. Gradually, the other staff members got used to the plump nurse with a kind heart and began to treat her much better. The other nurses no longer hesitated to initiate conversations with her. They often chatted during breaks between shifts and drank tea together whenever they had the chance or when there were very few patients in the hospital. They accepted Shirley as an equal. The prejudice that an overweight person would necessarily be withdrawn, envious, and irritable faded from their minds on its own. The slim beauties enjoyed chatting with Shirley, knowing that if they ever had a problem or needed a shift covered, their kind and responsive colleague would always help without expecting anything in return. Shirley quietly rejoiced at the changes happening in her life. For the first time, people treated her genuinely, without any ulterior motives. She felt her soul gradually thawing after years of resentment and rejection from others, and this feeling subtly made Shirley's life much brighter and happier. Shirley had just 1 month left in her internship. Marie told her that the chief doctor and the patients were very pleased with her work. Moreover, she had seamlessly integrated into the team, which meant there were no longer any obstacles to officially hiring her as a staff nurse. "Congratulations, Shirley," Marie said, shaking her hand reservedly. "You just need to hold on for another 3 weeks, and you'll officially become a full-fledged employee. Your salary will also increase, so you don't need to worry. We never shortchange our own." Honestly, this is the first time in my experience that someone with a vocational education has been so committed to their work and so eager to help people. Shirley blushed slightly but thanked the HR manager sincerely. "Thank you, Marie," the nurse said modestly. "I've taken the Hippocratic Oath. How could I harm people? Plus, I really enjoy helping. I hope to enroll in higher education next year. I'd like to study neurosurgery if I can pass the entrance exams." The woman looked at her with approval. Well done, you don't give up. That means you'll succeed. With your hard work and determination, you'll surely become one of the best, and we'll hear about you as a top-class doctor, Marie joked at the end of the conversation. A couple of days later, at a staff meeting, it was announced that the surgical department, where Shirley worked, would have a new chief. The next day, when Shirley arrived at work early in the morning, she was surprised to see a line of unfamiliar nurses gathered at the door of the new chief's office. What's going on here? Shirley asked. The new chief is hiring additional staff, replied Barbara Johnson, a blonde girl from trauma whom Shirley often worked shifts with. I have a feeling this Charles Davis is some kind of shady character. Shirley looked at the nurses. They were all alike, long-legged, with pronounced waists and hips, and such beautiful faces as if they had just stepped out of a glossy magazine. Nurse Shirley chose not to react to what was happening, though something deep inside her stirred, reminding her of the precariousness of her position among such a flower bed. However, she was convinced that she had earned her place through her excellent work performance, so she tried to focus on her duties and push thoughts of her own imperfections out of her mind. A few days later, Shirley was leaving the room where she had just finished bandaging the head of a businessman. He had fallen off his quad bike during a vacation and was now under observation at the clinic for a suspected concussion. As she stepped into the corridor, she nearly collided with a burly, bald man with square glasses. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Shirley gasped in surprise. "I didn't expect anyone else to be around here except our girls." The bald man's face turned pale at the sight of the embarrassed nurse. A moment later, his mouth twisted into an unpleasant grimace. He quickly looked Shirley up and down before speaking in a condescending tone. "And what is this?" he drawled in a nasal voice. "Who dared to have an orangutan working among orchids?" "Excuse me?" Shirley asked, breathless with indignation. "Did you just call me an orangutan?" The man smirked crookedly. "Of course, I did. Who else? Do you see anyone else here as ugly as you?" "How dare you?" Shirley said, her voice trembling. "Who do you think you are, mister?" In response, the man simply held up his badge, which was hanging from a long silk lanyard around his neck. After reading the name, Shirley felt her heart sink. Charles Davis, the new head of the surgical department, was standing before her. Charles had disliked Shirley from the moment they met in that corridor. Whenever he had the chance, he would relentlessly mock her, using every offensive epithet in his arsenal. He did this at the most inconvenient times, when Shirley was busy with patients. For instance, one day, the surgeon entered the treatment room just as Shirley was attending to a burned arm of a client. The client was an attractive woman in her early 30s, and Charles, openly admiring her, didn't hold back on the compliments. "Oh, what excellent patients we have here. It's not right to say this, but you know, I'm even glad you ended up with us. It's always nice to see such beauty in the ward. And if she's recovering too. Are you enjoying your time with us?" The bewildered woman nodded. "Yes, the service is wonderful. Your nurse here is great too," she said with a warm smile at Shirley. Yes. "Well, I'm very glad that you're being treated well here." Charles leaned closer to Shirley and, quietly but so the patient could hear, hissed. "Wrap it up faster, you tubby lump. She's probably been suffering here for half an hour already. And who hired you, for heaven's sake? You've spoiled all the air in this room." With those words, he calmly left the room, and Shirley was left standing, barely holding back tears of frustration. Her face was flushed with anger, and she was very afraid of accidentally harming the patient. The patient had heard every word the surgeon had said and tried to comfort Shirley, whose hands were visibly trembling by that point. "Don't worry. I don't know what's wrong with him, but I know that people like him should be driven out of medicine with filthy rags. And you're just wonderful, Shirley. Don't let him get to you." Shirley thanked the woman for her concern and continued treating the burn. Unfortunately, these moments became increasingly frequent. It seemed as if the head of the department was deliberately trying to provoke Shirley, waiting for her nerves to completely break down and for her to want to quit the clinic on her own. Yet, despite all his mockery, the plus-sized nurse continued to diligently do her job, receiving only gratitude and sincere kindness from patients. This infuriated the surgeon the most. He couldn't ruin Shirley's work or the way others viewed her. Finally, Charles found a way to make Shirley's life even more unbearable. One day, he called her into his office and, in front of the colleagues present, reprimanded her for allegedly mixing up blood samples of two different patients while taking tests. "Do you even understand with that thick skull of yours what could have happened if, God forbid, I hadn't caught this monstrous mistake? Roberta Hale has acute pyelonephritis, she's scheduled for surgery soon, and Patricia Price only has gastritis. What would have happened? I could have cut an innocent person who just needed some pills while sending another one home to die," Charles scolded her. "But that's impossible," the frightened Shirley protested. "I personally filled out all the labels on the tubes and remember clearly, everything was marked correctly." "Oh, Shirley," Charles drawled, "you should at least be ashamed of lying in front of your senior colleagues. From now on, you're demoted to the role of a janitor. For now, temporarily. You'll clean floors, empty bedpans, and maybe you'll learn something useful besides how to puff up in front of the boss. They put your face on the honor board, and now you think you know better than the professionals at every turn." Humiliated and dejected, Shirley left the surgeon's office. She couldn't even imagine how the tubes could have been mixed up. She remembered how she had written everything down clearly and legibly, what tests, what preliminary diagnosis was on each patient's electronic chart. It was 100% error, but, as unpleasant as it was for Shirley to admit, Charles had likely pushed her out of the position she had earned through hard work. The next day, with tears streaming down her face, Shirley started working as a janitor. Most of her day was spent cleaning floors and medical vessels, washing patients' bedding, and tidying up utility rooms. Charles was openly pleased with the new situation. He didn't care for good specialists. He preferred to keep a small harem of the most attractive young medical school graduates in his department. A nurse doesn't need brains. What's so complicated about it? Bandaging a wound or delivering a pill on time, any parrot could do that. But beauty and charm are what make a great nurse, the lecherous head mused. This was why, on the day of his appointment, Charles had organized a mini-casting for the main assistant's positions. Shirley also understood why Charles treated her this way and wasn't at all surprised to see, the next day, a pretty, long-legged beauty with pouting lips in her former position. The new nurse was sweetly cooing into the head's ear while Charles smiled like a cat that had had its fill of cream. At some point, Shirley felt a wave of hurt and cried again, unable to understand why her size made some people view her as less than human. Charles's harassment continued. He would easily knock over a bucket of dirty water if Shirley forgot to pick it up on time or would come up with a new insulting nickname that made her want to quit and leave the clinic for good. Of course, Shirley could have complained to the chief doctor. Patrick would certainly have addressed the issue, but the girl knew that doing so would make her life unbearable. Charles would find another way to tarnish her reputation with colleagues and superiors, and she might even be given a wolf ticket, a reputation for troublemaking. Shirley wasn't ready to give up on her dream like that, so she had to endure and continue silently scrubbing the floors. Patrick Walker, the 35-year-old chief doctor of a private clinic, was sitting in his office, anxiously going through a stack of complaints from visitors. As he flipped through the papers, he saw the same phrases repeatedly highlighted in almost every second complaint: negligence, carelessness in handling wounds, injects like a butcher, thick needles, nurse is so dumb she can't even wash her hands before touching my wound, and similar complaints. One particularly negative review even mentioned that some clinic staff preferred to apply and touch up their complex makeup right at their workstations, without considering the presence of patients. On one hand, there is no smoke without fire. There were many complaints about the surgical department, where a new head had recently been appointed. Patrick didn't particularly like Charles, but he had been presented as an excellent specialist. Moreover, everyone in the medical community knows that no matter how good a medical institution is, patients will always find something to criticize, even in a prestigious and expensive clinic like theirs. Most of the complaints were anonymous. People were afraid of incurring the wrath of the doctors and were thus hesitant to reveal their names. What if they ended up back here someday? In any case, Patrick had no concrete evidence of Charles's or his staff's wrongdoing, so he decided to employ a bit of subterfuge and installed a hidden camera in the surgical department. He did this quietly, in secret from the main staff, to avoid unnecessary gossip and to ensure no one could tip off the surgeon. Patrick needed evidence to decide what to do next with the head of the department. The following evening, two homeless men stumbled into the clinic's emergency department. Their dirty clothes and matted long hair left no doubt that they had come straight from the streets. One of them carried a young, unconscious girl, pale as a sheet. Blood was continuously oozing from a large gaping wound on her head, staining her face and her simple light gray dress red. "Help! Someone help!" the men shouted. "Doctor, please. The girl is in bad shape." Shirley, who was mopping the floor in the lobby at the time, heard the cries and quietly moved towards the homeless men. She hid in the shadow of a large potted plant behind a decorative ceramic pot, making her presence almost invisible despite her physical size. The on-duty nurse at the reception immediately ran to get the head of the department. After what felt like an eternity, Charles sauntered into the lobby with a lazy gait. "Where the hell have you been, you idiot?" Shirley thought to herself. "The girl will bleed out right here and now if we don't act fast." More than anything, Shirley wanted to jump out of her hiding place and help the unfortunate girl, but she couldn't risk it. Doing so might worsen things for everyone. The surgeon only approached the injured girl, who was still being held by the homeless men, by a few steps. From his unsteady, slightly swaying walk, Shirley could tell he was slightly intoxicated. "Thank God, doctor," one of the men lamented. "We found her in the yard next to the club. I don't know what she was doing there in the middle of the night, but it looks like she was attacked. Help her, will you? I feel so sorry for the girl, she's still so young. And those bastards nearly cracked her head open. We saw everything, the robbers and how it all went down." To Shirley's horror, Charles only twisted his face into a drunken smirk. "These bombs are getting bold, huh? Elizabeth, did you see this? They dragged their girl over here and think I'm going to treat her for free. No way, gentlemen, take your girl and get lost. We don't need any more whores showing up here with injuries in the middle of the night." Waving off the homeless men and the injured girl, Charles staggered back to his office, ignoring the pleas for help from the beggars. "How can you even call yourself a doctor after this? May you burn in hell, you devil." The two men cursed at the departing surgeon. When Charles and the young pretty receptionist nurse disappeared from view, Shirley took a risk and quickly emerged from her improvised hiding place. She rolled a stretcher out from a side corridor and swiftly wheeled it to the injured girl and her companions. "I'll take care of her. Help me lift her onto the stretcher." The homeless men exchanged silent glances but immediately complied with the nurse's request. As the girl was placed on the cold surface, she let out a long groan. "Be careful." "That's it," Shirley said, adjusting the girl's position. "We'll help you now, dear, don't worry. Just stay quiet, and everything will be fine." "Thank you, miss." The homeless men expressed their gratitude to Shirley. "We thought you had no decent people working here. How can you trust doctors after something like this?" Shirley nodded and quickly transported the injured girl to the farthest room, where no one could see them. There, Shirley meticulously cleaned the wound, treated it with special ointment, and stitched it with a small, neat stitch so that the inevitable scar would be barely noticeable. After setting up an 4-drip, Shirley watched as the unconscious girl gradually started to regain consciousness. A faint flush returned to her cheeks, and the twitching of her eyelids ceased, which was already a good sign in her condition. Soon, the girl, now awake, spoke in a weak voice, asking Shirley to lend her phone. "Please, call. I need to make a call. He's worried." Shoo, calm down, dear, Shirley soothed her, gently stroking her thin arm. Once you're feeling stronger, you can call whoever you want, I promise. For now, you need to rest and sleep. You don't understand, the girl insisted in a faint voice. His heart. What's your name? The nurse asked, trying to distract her. The girl only weakly shook her head. Nicole Ruiz, she whispered and lost consciousness. The next morning, the clinic was in a state of chaos. No wonder, because Mike Ruiz himself, a major industrial businessman and international millionaire, had arrived. The distinguished man, stepping out of his enormous black SUV, almost kicked the doors open as he stormed into the medical center. He was furious. Where is she? Where's my daughter? He shouted at the pretty nurse. Please give me your last name, she squeaked in response. And her first name. And please don't yell at me, I can't stand loud noises. The millionaire looked at her as if he was ready to strangle her right there on the spot, then enunciated slowly. Ruiz. Nicole Ruiz. Is that clear to you, miss? Yes, I understand. We don't have anyone by that name admitted here, the nurse replied with a lifted nose. What? The businessman nearly choked with anger. She sent me a text message from your lousy medical center last night. Am I supposed to believe it was just a dream? The flustered nurse could only blink rapidly with her large, fan-like eyelashes. At that moment, Shirley approached Mike and, without saying a word, led him to his daughter's room. Through the glass, Shirley saw how Mike happily embraced his daughter. That night, Nicole had indeed managed to send a message to her father from Shirley's phone. It turned out Nicole was attacked while returning home from her friend's house in the evening. That was the only thing she could remember. She couldn't make out the attackers' faces in the dark. Later, Mike summoned all the clinic staff who had been on duty that shift to the lobby. Who saved my daughter? He asked calmly. I guarantee any promotion this person wants. I have enough money and connections to arrange it. Out of natural modesty, Shirley chose to remain silent, but Charles decided to take credit. It was me, the surgeon said, dramatically looking down at the floor. Mike, when your daughter was brought to us, I immediately ensured she received the best care possible. Shirley nearly choked on such audacity from the head of the department. Oh, Charles. The millionaire began with a heartfelt voice. You wouldn't believe how grateful I am. Please excuse me for being a bit upset when I arrived. But, you understand, she's my only daughter. Of course. Charles nodded eagerly, fawning. Family is sacred, how could anyone not be patient? At that moment, the chief physician unexpectedly appeared at the door. Hold off on the thanks, Mike, Patrick asked the millionaire. He's not the person you should be showering with gratitude. With these words, Patrick clicked the remote, and the large screen in the center of the lobby lit up with the true events of that night. The businessman saw everything, how Charles had outright dismissed his daughter and how the only nurse who had appeared to help, and who was actually presentable in the whole building, was none other than the curvy Shirley. This is all blatant lies. Charles tried to defend himself. What are you accusing me of? Oh, Charles, I have a lot more interesting material on this flash drive, Patrick replied with a smile. Everything from how you take bribes from the wealthiest patients to how you spend time with young nurses when no one is watching, and your indulgence in alcohol during shifts. I have plenty more on you. Charles could only remain silent. The heroic employee was fired the very next day, which no one in the clinic regretted, as his so-called magnificent harem was also sent packing, leaving only those who truly loved and performed their job well. Shirley became friends with Nicole. The businessman's daughter was genuinely grateful to the caring nurse and became Shirley's first true friend. She was able to appreciate the girl's inner qualities and had no qualms about being seen with her in public, as she had no prejudices about her friend's weight. Shirley soon began dating the chief physician. Initially, no one believed that there could be anything serious between them, but Shirley managed to win the young man's heart with her purity and warmth. Patrick, who had been a widower for a long time, took the relationship as a sign from above. Their relationship was full of romance, and after a year, despite the mockery of some people around Patrick, they married. Many thought their marriage wouldn't last even 6 months, but they were all wrong. Shirley finally consulted with a good and experienced dietitian, and with Nicole's help and her father's connections, she was able to work on her health at one of the world's best wellness resorts. She managed to completely change her eating habits and overall diet, as well as gradually incorporate exercise and daily walks into her life. All this helped her to start losing weight fairly quickly, and within a year and a half, Shirley had lost more than half of her previous weight. The girl's happiness knew no bounds, as her life now had truly taken on new colors. But she didn't stop there and continued to steadily improve her health and slim down. A few months later, the nurse was surprised to discover that she was pregnant. This gift was one of the greatest in her life, as she had almost forgotten about the possibility of motherhood. Her husband Patrick was overjoyed at the prospect of a new addition to their family and became even more attentive to his wife's health, doing everything possible to ensure that she was the happiest woman. Exactly 9 months later, the couple had a wonderful baby boy named Larry. Their son further strengthened the Walker family, and his mother took great care to ensure he had proper nutrition and exercise, as she feared her problems might be inherited. Fortunately, that did not happen, but Shirley continued to keep a close watch on her child's health for as long as possible. If you enjoyed the story, please support it with a like and a comment. All the best to you.